Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. Hope you are all doing well. This is a big first for us. This is our first live stream, so please go gentle on us, guys. I'm, of course, joined by Liam. You all know him as at the FSA tweet. At one point, I will get that Twitter handle correct. How you doing, Dan?
Eventually, you will, Rich. I'm good, thank you. How's everything with you?
Yeah, it's going well. It's been a ridiculously hot day. I was very pleased to be sat in an air-conditioned office for most of it.
Likewise.
But yeah, you know, it's good. I've got a new haircut just for the live show, so you know, I've really pulled out all the stops, should we say? But before we dive in, let's handle the most important matter, which it's becoming a bit of a thing, Liam. But the cocktail of the week. What have we got today?
This time you're going to actually be able to see it. I don't know how well you can see that.
Very
is, of course, you wouldn't have it any other way. So that is a Cosmopolitan. I've never made one before. So before the show, I had a good couple of goes just to make sure it tasted nice before we came on the pod. So that is vodka Cointreau, I believe is the pronunciation, as we went through last week. Cranberry juice, lemon juice, and lime juice. So if you want to try that at home, just find a quick recipe. It is good. I'll tell you that.
Very nice. I feel like I've just walked into an episode of Sex and the City. You're going to tell me you're too young and you've never heard Sex and the City now.
I've heard of it. I've never watched it.
My wife loved it. So yeah, I'm sad to say that I've watched most of the episodes. So anyway, enough about Sex and the City. So let's dive into the show. So today we're going to talk through basically what to do with the end of your bench in terms of your dynasty rosters. So we're calling it who and what to stash. Before we dive into the show, though, I'm pleased to let you know yet again that today's podcast and live stream is brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in below the waist grooming. We have an exclusive offer for you with 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code 5Yard. I'll be honest, if you're listening to this and you've not already gone and got yourself a lawnmower 4.0 from Manscaped, you are absolutely missing out. It is without doubt one of the most impressive pieces of kit I've ever had. And I wouldn't stop short of saying it's completely changed my life. So yeah, whatever you're doing, stop. Well, actually, listen to the show, then stop, then go and order yourself something from Manscaped because it is truly fantastic. So getting into the show then, Liam. So who and what to stash? So I guess the first thing for us to kind of clarify is what are you counting as an end of the bench kind of stash? What are you counting as those roster spots that you're needing to stash?
So particularly, I'm probably looking at the end 30% of your roster. Well, end of your bench is the way that I worked it out earlier when I was looking at different numbers. If you've got a good rotation between those 30%, you're going to be able to pick up players during the season. And for the past, say, 3-4 seasons, we've had a good running back for that season come out of waivers. We've had James Robinson, we had Philip Lindsay a couple of years ago. We've had plenty, and those are the guys that I want to try and keep the roster churning, because if you get a stagnant roster in Dynasty, I think you're completely going to fall behind the rest of your league, because you're not going to want to give up players that may not ever see your lineup, and you'll just fall behind the competition, basically. How about you? How do you feel about end of the roster guys? What's your plan with them?
So I think, first of all, to kind of classify as what I'm counting as end of the bench. So what I like to do is I basically like to take one backup for each position. So if it's a super flex, I'll count that as my third quarterback. If it's, one QB, it'll be my second quarterback. And then, if it's 2 running back spots, my third running back, and so on. So I've got 1 backup for each starting position, and then 1 flex backup and 1 super flex backup. So that normally means that I'm looking at 6 guys on my bench that I'm counting as my kind of starting roster. So in a normal league, you normally start in anywhere between 8 and 10 guys. I count my starting roster as like that 14 to 16 players, because I think for me that is what I need to help cover bye weeks. That is what I need to kind of help get by injuries. The rest of my bench, so if it's a shallower league, it's probably only 4 spots. If you're in a 20-man league, 20 roster league. If it's a much deeper league, I play in some super deep dynasty leagues where it's like 30, 35-man rosters, and that then means that my end of bench stashes is north of kind of 15 guys. So those are the positions that I guess we're looking at and we're really trying to talk about today. My overall approach to those is, anyone that's been listening to it for a while shouldn't be shocked to hear that I'm normally approaching those volume-based positions. So I'm looking at quarterback and running back primarily. And what I mean by volume-based positions is that those are positions that basically are reliant on volume. And, if there's a starting quarterback, it doesn't matter if it's Jeff Driscoll or, Nathan, maybe not Nathan Peterman, actually. But whoever it's going to be, at some point, if they're a starting quarterback or indeed a starting running back, they are potentially fantasy relevant. So those are the positions I'm looking at. Whereas for me, I feel like wide receiver and tight end, it doesn't work that kind of smoothly. If I'm looking at, say, I don't know, if AJ Brown and Julio Jones get injured in week 1, Josh Reynolds doesn't then immediately become a wide receiver 2 because he's the only wide receiver in the offense, kind of thing. So whereas that is the case generally with running backs. So I think for me, I'm generally trying to lean towards those volume-based positions. I'm generally looking at youth where I can, but I'm not purely focused on youth. I guess what I'm looking at is, again, another thing that I'll bang on about is I'm looking at contract situations. I'm looking at depth chart. So if I've got potential, starting running back that could be looking to move on at the end of the year, someone like a Mike Davis in Atlanta. Obviously, his contract, yes, it's a 2-year contract, but it's really only a 1-year contract. So I'm really interested in potential backups in that offense. Someone like a Wayne Gallman, who, yes, again, is only on a 1-year contract, but if he performs, could easily be the kind of the starter as soon as next year. So that's kind of my, I guess, overall approach. Lynn, are you similar? Do you lean more towards, wide receiver tight ends, or are you coming around to my way of thinking, shall we say?
I am definitely coming around to your way of thinking. Whether that's because you forced me to in the Dynasty Listener League, I have no idea.
Good to know that my indoctrination is finally
No, I have come to agree with you that running backs are the most likely to get that value jump, and you're able to sell on those running backs. But I think the thing that people fall into the trap of is wide receivers. You tend to see wide receivers get a massive jump for 1 week, and you'll never predict it. So everyone tries to hoard wide receivers because you don't know which one. Like, I'm just thinking last year he had players like Isaiah McKenzie that scored 3 touchdowns in 1 week. At the end of the season, you had Cedric Wilson come out of the woodwork out of nowhere and score 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns that week. You tend to see it more with wide receivers, but you just have no idea who that's going to be. And I think people have gotten wise to buying those type of wide receivers because you have no idea whether they're actually going to ever do it again. So I definitely have come around to you and taking those running backs, because people find running backs a lot more safe. So if something does happen where they have a bump week, they probably hold their value for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's not even now like you can, Cedric Wilson has that 2 touchdown week. It's not even like you can sell him for a third round pick the following week, because everybody in your league's turning around and going, it's a 1 week thing. I know that's not going to happen. Even somebody like a Nelson Aguilar, who, if you look at his end of season stats last year, he had a decent season. That was mainly because I think he was second in the league in terms of deep touchdowns behind Tyreek Hill. Who knows when they were going to come? Yes, he looks good at the end of the season, but you never feel comfortable starting him. So yeah, I kind of agree. In terms of types of players to avoid, is there anyone that you're looking at and going, that type of position, that type of player is someone that I basically never want to roster?
No, everyone's rosterable for the right price in my mind, but there are players, Kyle Pitts, that tend to be a lot more valuable in the community as a whole's eye rather than what I predict them as. So the short answer is I would roster anyone if I can get them cheap enough, but it just depends on that price across the board. There are certain people that I just don't believe in, but even then I'd take a shot at them, because if everyone else has an idea or has this belief that they're going to do well, why shouldn't I take a shot at that? That's my thought process anyway. How do you feel about that, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. I don't, I tend to obviously hoard running backs. I tend to try and avoid those sort of running backs that I'd class in that sort of 40 to 60 range in terms of ADP, that I don't think have top 24 upside within their range of potential outcomes. And those are the kind of guys that I sort of view as roster cloggers. I think Mecole Hardman is the perfect roster clogger. He is a guy that everybody, listening will know that at some point you've rostered Mecole Hardman and it's felt right. If Tyreek Hill goes down or this guy's the number 2 receiver in a fantastic offense, he could be fantasy relevant. But the problem is that he'll have 2-3 good weeks. But I don't think, short of Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, both tearing their Achilles, there's not going to be a Mecole Hardman, stretch where you feel comfortable starting every week. So those are the kind of guys that I like to avoid. You could also throw in someone like a Christian Kirk, who's, the third, maybe fourth receiver on his offense. I don't particularly want to roster somebody like that, without wanting to bash young, fast receivers, someone like a Henry Ruggs as well. It's just a guy that I'm not looking to roster. We talked about it last week, someone like a Jalen Reagor that I'm pretty much out on because he had such a bad rookie year. So I'm selling for whatever I can get, really. But I guess what I was keen to do, Liam, was kind of talk about in a bit more depth the groups that we are targeting and perhaps how we're kind of splitting them up and kind of delineating guys that we want to be stashing and guys that we don't. So if we were to talk about quarterbacks, so obviously we're presuming every starting quarterback is rostered. If we're talking about Superflex League, you can probably throw in what I class as your high-end backups. So whether you want to be, it sounds bad saying they're high-end, but a Cam Newton, a Taysom Hill, a Drew Lock, a Jordan Love, perhaps. Guys
at the moment, Justin Fields and Trey Lance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably counting them as, they're not going to be end of bench stashes, are they?
I said that purely for Tom. I hope he's listening.
But yeah, they're the guys that we're not worrying about rostering because they're already rostered. So the guys that I'm looking at is basically any other quarterback that I'm not 100% confident about their starting quarterback. So some of those, without wanting to jump on the bandwagon and bash Ryan Fitzpatrick again, I'm rostering Taylor Heineke wherever I can because I mean, we can sit and make jokes, but is anybody guaranteeing that Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to start 17 games this year?
I'm not guaranteeing anyone's going to start 16 games this year, but I just love your absolute hatred for him. It's so funny.
It's a brand now. I've absolutely got to stick to it. And then, another guy, he was, second in the league in points per game at the quarterback position if you remove games played, and that's Marcus Mariota. Yes, I think Derek Carr is a very good guy. I think he's a very good quarterback. I think I'd throw him in the top 10 to 15 in terms of NFL quarterbacks. Appreciate that's not for fantasy. But I wouldn't be shocked if, Marcus Mariota gets another chance to start. I wouldn't be gobsmacked if we see a big injury to a playoff-bound team, whether Marcus Mariota could be floated out as kind of trade bait early in the season. If we see maybe Dallas have the same situation as they did last year, maybe, someone like a Dak goes down in week 2 or 3, could you see them sending, a third-round pick, a second-round pick to Las Vegas for Marcus Mariota? What do you think, Liam? Do you think Mariota could potentially get a start?
I think Mariota is probably the top backup you want outside of the premium backups that you've been speaking about. He had that really one good game last year, and it proved to everyone that he does have something left in him. It just really depends on whether he can get on the field. Without an injury, I don't see him getting on the field behind Carr. I think that the Raiders absolutely love Carr. I say love, they wouldn't mind letting him go, but I don't think they'd ever start Mariota over Carr at all.
No.
So I think without an injury or a trade, I don't think he ever sees the field, but that's what you're betting on with any of these guys. You're hoping that someone gets onto the field, and if someone does, you get a massive spike in value, and you either sell or you can use them as your QB2, or hopefully not even that, you QB3 or 4. So Mariota specifically, yes. Other guys that I'm looking at, Jordan Love. He showed flashes in the preseason. He wasn't brilliant, but I think right now people are seeing that Aaron Rodgers is going to stay there for at least this year, and you probably can pick him up cheaper as like a more of a backlash to what his value went up to when we had no idea what Rodgers was doing.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to hear you've mentioned Jordan Love, because I'll be honest, having watched him in the preseason, I was not impressed. I think, when you see a guy hurling the ball off his back foot into triple coverage, you suddenly think, yeah, he's probably not going to be a starter in the NFL. But I completely get what you're saying from a value standpoint. I think you can probably go and buy Jordan Love for what we talking, probably a third, maybe you have to pay a second. That's, I think a great option, because and put your fingers in your ears, Liam, I think Rodgers is gone next year. I think there is no world in which Rodgers is starting for the Green Bay Packers next year. So
I've come to that realization as well. I really don't think he stays next year.
And I think that the Packers, if Rodgers goes, they've got to give Jordan Love the chance. You can't spend a first-round pick on somebody that you're then not going to give the chance to start. Our guy Mace has just shouted into the show. He's saying, could Mitchell Trubisky be dealt perhaps? I think it's an interesting one. I think I'd need to look into his contract situation, whether he is dealt. I think he's basically not getting paid much, so he could absolutely be dealt. I do wonder, though, with the Bills, I think they're essentially, one of the 2, 3, maybe 4 favourites to win the Super Bowl. So I think for me, they're keeping Mitchell Trubisky as Josh Allen insurance. If for whatever happens, Josh Allen goes down for a stretch in season, if Josh Allen got injured going into the playoffs, you've got a guy that's got proven starting experience. Okay, it was pretty poor, but he's probably one of the better backups in the league. I would be shocked if they'd want to deal with him unless they get an absolute haul back, because I think that they'd want to keep him as that kind of insurance break in case of emergency, something happens to Josh Allen. What do you think?
Yeah, he's essentially Josh Allen very light. He has the rushing upside. He just doesn't have the accuracy, and he's not. I don't think he's ever going to take that jump like Josh Allen did. I think this is where he's going to be. Yeah,
because he'll run the same offense but worse. So he's the ideal backup, isn't he?
Yeah. And just for the contract situation, Rich, he's only got a dead cap of $2 million next year. It's $2.5 million contract with $2 million dead. So it's not a terrible contract to get out of either. So, yeah, I definitely think he could be dealt, but it really depends on, one, the Bills season, and two, who's going to pay up for him, because what else can you get out there for cheaper? Mariota is a great example. I think you could probably get a Mariota for cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the Bills have probably got higher aspirations than the Raiders, haven't they? I think the Bills are very much Super Bowl or bust this year, and the Raiders, I think, if they could scrape into the playoffs, they'd probably consider it a fantastic year. So I think it's kind of where the teams are, where they're likely to trade their backups. So leaving the quarterback position behind, we'll move to running backs. So what is your approach to kind of end of bench stashes when it comes to running backs? Are there any particular types of back you're looking at? Are there any sort of particular teams, perhaps, or what are you really looking for here?
So, as I said earlier, I've got onto your train of let's just take running backs for the last 15 rounds of every draft. Specifically with your back end guys, you're most likely not getting a running back 2 on their depth chart. But if you can, someone like Jerick McKinnon, I've been picking up a lot. I think that he had the upside to get the 2 role, and even if he got the 2 role, I think he's got the upside to see the field at least. You've got other guys like Darrington Evans that unfortunately is now injured or on COVID IR, one of the 2, I can't remember. But someone like him, someone that like a Devontae Booker who has a workhorse in front of them and could potentially see a huge uptick in volume. Exactly what you said, volume backs. But it really depends on the offense as well. Like, I know that I just mentioned the Giants offense, but I think the other offenses are much better. And the better the offense, the more chance you've got of a better production from that volume. I think every running back, if their lead running back goes down, is going to see a massive volume. It just depends on the efficiency. And the better the offense, in my opinion anyway, the better the offense, the better the efficiency is going to be. Yeah. Talent does come into it, don't get me wrong, but to an extent there is going to be the how good the offense is. Like last year, no running back did well in New York with the Giants because they were absolutely terrible. Yeah. But if, say, CEH went down, then it over in Kansas, whoever the backup running back was, I believe it was Tyrone Williams last year, he would have had a massive uptick, and you probably would have got an early second for him in value-wise. So, in short, you definitely have to look at the offense, but I think it more comes down to who's got less of a murkier backfield, because if you can say definitively someone is the running back 2, then great news. But if someone's got more of a murkier backfield, you have no idea whether they're going to be the lead back when X player goes down, the lead back goes down or not. How are you feeling about that?
I think, I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm targeting basically the best offenses. One, I'm always targeting. I was all over Jeff Wilson in pretty much every league I was in last year because he was the 3rd option in San Francisco and you could basically pick him up for free. I'm doing that again this year. I'm all over JaMychal Hasty because nobody seems to talk about him. But yes, you've got Raheem Mostert, who is fantastic and crazy fast, but he's always injured. Yes, you've then got Trey Sermon, who I've got really high hopes for as a rookie coming in that they traded up for. But we've seen time and time again, whoever the running back is in that offense will produce. So I'm going out and getting JaMychal Hasty. But pretty much I'm looking for any running back that I see as a path to volume. Perhaps he's an injury away. You joke about it that I take 15 running backs every draft, and and that's pretty much true. I'll take five quarterbacks. I'll take, one backup for each spot, and then I'm just absolutely smashing as many of those positions as I can, because I really want as many running backs as possible. Because they are one injury away from being fantasy relevant, and if you can, I hate on volume-based RB2s, but if you can walk into, RB2 production by streaming guys off the end of your bench who, every week somebody's going to get injured, that's kind of my approach. So yeah, at the moment, particularly guys I'm liking, Wayne Gallman, I think is an injury away from being fantastic. I like the call of Devontae Booker. Ty Johnson up in New York, I think he's going to carve out a role. He's crazy fast. He's almost Raheem Mostert in New York, because he's really fast and he fits that scheme quite well. But yeah, I think there's plenty of good options. It's basically about just looking at depth chart and trying to find a running back that you like.
I think you've got multiple ways to look at this, and specifically for me, as I said, I go for the least competition and the clear RB2, and I suppose the best offense as well, just to see if something does happen to the lead back, you get that massive spike in value immediately, rather than having to wait for them to play a game and see who's actually going to take that lead role after the injury. But as you said, Jermichael Hasty, I think people forget last year that he was two different teams tried to claim Jermichael Hasty over, I think it was like a 3-week period at the start of the season, off the practice squad of the 49ers. And both times the 49ers blocked them and then moved him up to the 53 to make sure it couldn't happen again, because they couldn't block him anymore. They want him. There's no other way around it. And I know that they took Sermon and Elijah Mitchell this year, and I do like Elijah Mitchell, but I think in that offense, whoever does get that starting role is going to be fantasy relevant. It just really depends on who. And I like your shout about Ty Johnson, because he has the top end speed and he looks really good. It's just who is actually going to be that number one in that offense. No one really knows. And I suppose those are the guys, especially at the end of your roster, that you want to take a shot on, because you've got the highest upside there. So for me, really, it's all about the value spike, because if something does happen, unless I'm contending or know that I'm in the hot seat to go and get one of the top seeds, I'm probably getting rid in case I don't make the playoffs or get a low seed in the playoffs and have to play one of the high seeds. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that, worst case scenario with some of these guys, they walk into a role and you can sell them super quick. If you're not a contender, a contender is going to pay up for, Wayne Gallman last year. He was fantastic down the stretch. Somebody is going to pay for that guy.
So as you said, someone would have paid up for Jeff Wilson. I bet you sold him in a bunch of leagues last year when it became the RB1, especially those that you weren't contending in. So anyone like that, and I'm not hating on those deals, because if you paid up for a Jeff Wilson last year, he did extremely well for you. So
well, my stat that I use is if you took the running, I've got to word this right, the running back that got the most carries in every game for the 49ers last year, that was the RB3. And that was a mix of Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, Jeff Wilson, Jermichael Hasty. I'm sure I'm missing one.
You are. I just can't think who it is.
But yeah, like it's Jarrett McKinnon. That's the one.
There you go.
Basically, that offense just produces. So if I can get a piece of that offense for free, that yes, I'm relying on a running back injury, but running back injuries happen. It's fairly straightforward.
It's not something that you want to rely on, but it's a part of the game. As I said with the quarterbacks a couple of months ago now, they do happen, and it's a horrible part of the game because you want to see everyone succeed. But to have some people succeed, you do need those injuries. And last year we saw Mike Davis come out of nowhere, and now he's got what he's looking to be anyway, a lead role in Atlanta. We've got like the people that jumped in for Dak when he went down. I know that Dalton was one of them, but at least Ben DiNucci got some playing time and Cooper Rush got some playing time. It happens, and it is a part of the game. And if we could take out injuries, I'm sure it'd make everyone's lives a lot easier, especially people like Edwin, who we had on the show a couple of weeks ago, because he wouldn't need to do injury analysis 10 minutes after every injury news. But it happens, and we're not hoping for injuries, but we're preparing for them. And this is the best way to definitely take advantage of something that many players don't take advantage of, or at least that I see anyway.
What about the wide receiver position? I know we talked about, potentially not looking at wide receivers as those end of bench spots. Are there any types of players or any areas that you would consider rostering a depth wide receiver piece?
Again, it goes back to the best offense for me. Back end guys like
you're going to say McCole Hardman now, aren't you?
No, I was going to say a different Chiefs wide receiver. I was going to say someone like Byron Pringle, for example.
Okay,
someone that has shown flashes but needs to really get consistent. This isn't the best offense, but they have a great wide receiver called KJ Hamler in Denver. Although he's not the best wide receiver, he was a second-round pick last year, and he could really do well this year. It's just he needs that injury to get the volume.
Let's stay on KJ Hamlet, because I think he's a really interesting point, because this is a guy that had a fantastic, profile as a prospect coming out. He had, decent breakout age, decent, production profile. Got that second round draft capital, looked pretty good in a lot of rookie models, looked for certainly very good in mine, but is coming into a situation, as you said, where yes, they've got Cortland Sutton, who is that prototypical X receiver, good down the field, contested catch guy. You've got a Jerry Jeudy, who is, I think, already a top 5 route runner in the league, is fantastic at creating separation, and he's the ideal Z receiver, Z receiver, whatever you want to call it, wherever you are across the pond. And then you've got KJ Hamler, who profiles as that slot burner type that can take the top off. But I don't know if he's ever going to be more than that. I think he's one of these that's a better NFL receiver than he is a kind of fantasy receiver. Do you think that he's an injury away from relevancy, or do you think that even if Jeudy or Sutton go down again, do you think it's just going to be good weeks mixed in with a lot of bad?
I think anyone you're taking at that point is good weeks with a mix of bad. I don't think anyone that moves in as a wide receiver 3 on their own team at best is going to be able to move in and do really well. That you're looking at the top end wide receiver 3s on their own team. So you're looking at Tyler Boyd, Gallup, whoever you want out of the Jaguars wide receiver core as the wide receiver 3. I've heard a lot of DJ Chark over the past month or two. So whoever you want out of the most talented, should I say, wide receiver cores, those are the ones that are going to step up if there is an injury. I think everywhere else you're kind of looking at, if they do a couple of weeks in a really good spike, should I say, then maybe there's a bit of value there. But as we talked about earlier, I really don't think that wide receivers see that value spike as much as a running back will. So I don't try to roster them. I've transitioned a lot of my rosters this year, because last year I rostered a lot of wide receivers at the back end, trying to find those production weeks, and it didn't really work out. But I think a lot of people try to do that and try and sell on the value. And I really think in Dynasty you need to sell on the value of the running backs, because they see an immediate value spike. Wide receivers specifically, production-wise, may be good, but are you ever going to count on them? Are you ever going to be able to pick that week?
I think for me, it's, I mentioned it earlier, it basically needs to be, do I see a path to top 24 upside? If the answer to that is no, then I'm probably not rostering them, because I just don't see the point. I think outside the top 24, you're just playing a week of, could they catch a deep touchdown or whatever? And I think that KJ Hamler is the guy that, for me personally, I think he's a good receiver. He had a great college profile, but I just don't want to roster, because I just think that even with injuries, even if Sutton goes down, even if Fant goes down, even if Judy goes down, I don't think he's going to be a top 36 receiver, because I just don't think he's the type of player that's going to be able to command volume in the NFL. And I say command volume because I'm a strong believer in that volume is a talent. I know that people will bang on, Deontay Johnson or, let's go Tyler Boyd. I think that commanding targets and earning targets and commanding that volume is absolutely a talent. And I just don't think that the type of receiver someone like KJ Hamler is ever going to, even in the ideal situation where he is the only target, I can't see him commanding, 100, 120 targets.
I think there's a couple of things there for me. So one, I think volume, if you're commanding a volume within a talented wide receiver core, and I mean someone like a Bengals wide receiver core, or the three that I mentioned earlier, then yes, I agree with you that player is probably the best there. But if there is literally no one else, like Lions, for example, that's a perfect example this year. Are you really not rostering any of the Lions wide receivers, especially at cost right now, because you don't think they're talented enough?
I'm going to break your heart here. No, I'm rostering Tyrone Williams in redraft. If I'm holding him in Dynasty and I've got a couple of shares, I'm waiting for the first couple of weeks where he commands obscene volume, and then I'm selling.
But you are rostering them. That's my point. I'm not saying you want to roster them for the whole season, because again, I really don't think anyone in the Lions offense is going to do well apart from Swift and even maybe Hawkinson. But I don't think we've got to look at the whole season here. I think it's pure, or at least the way that I'm looking at it, you look at purely the value at this point. If a Tyrone Williams does go off for 2 games, people are going to think, oh, he's going to be the target. And then you sell at that point.
But I think I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I think Tyrone Williams is a different type of receiver to KJ Hamler. I think that Tyrone Williams, he averaged, I think it was his last year in LA, what was then San Diego is now LA, with the Chargers. Let's just say that's easier. I think he averaged over 7 targets a game. Like, we've seen him command solid volume. We saw that stretch in his first year with the Raiders, where I think he caught something like 5 touchdowns in the first 5 weeks. Like, he had a ridiculous start to the season. But he's been a number 1 receiver. He's commanded volume. So that's, I guess, why I'm saying I'll roster Tyrone Williams. If Tyrone Williams was to go down, I don't want any part of Quintez Cephas, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can't even think who else. Trinity Benson is the only guy that I'm potentially interested in. And that's because, again, I think he's a different type of receiver that could potentially command volume. But I feel like we could go back and forth on this. Tight ends, Liam. Let's leave it there. We're just going to keep going back and forth. Tight ends. What are you looking at if you're rostering a deep end of bench tight end? What is it you're looking at?
You really want to start on tight ends? Really? I think we're going to go back and forth on this one, mate.
We've got our Ryan Fitzpatrick mentioned, so now we can talk about tight ends.
So with tight ends, you all know that I'm not a huge fan of the tight end position in terms of their scoring. I love the tight end position when I watch tape. I think it's one of the most interesting positions in the game, but I just don't see the fantasy relevance enough outside of the top 3 to really concern myself with a lot of the rest of the league, I suppose. I think with what we saw last season with two people that were going undrafted in a lot of even dynasty startups with 30-odd rounds within Logan Thomas and Robert Tonyan. I think with seeing that, and they shooting up into a top, I believe it was a top 8 position for both. I think they went 3 and 4, depending on your format.
Top 5, yeah.
So, yeah, even a top 5 position, I've just started ignoring tight ends to an extent. I'm not ignoring it to the point where I'm taking backup tight ends and that's it. I'm just not interested in them whatsoever. I think the only, specifically to this show anyway, I think the only guys that I'm really looking for, whoever that Houston tight end 1 is going to be. I think
Jordan Akins, I can tell you it now. I've been riding the Jordan Akins bandwagon for 2 years. Yes,
I think Akins is a great shout.
Yeah, I've been all in on Akins for the last 2 years. Listeners of the Dynasty Island pod, back when it was, last year, I had a under 5% rostered player that I was highlighting, and Jordan Akins was about 4 or 5 times. I think that someone's got to catch the ball in that offense, and I really think that it could potentially be Jordan Akins. I think that's
outside of Cooks. Who else is there?
Exactly.
I think Nico Collins is going to do really well this year, but we'll see. I think back to tight ends anyway. I think someone like that, and maybe in a couple of years' time, a Brevin Jordan. I don't think he's going to do much this year, but I was really high on him pre-draft. I wanted him as my tight end too. And then when he went after, I think it was 2 rounds after Freiermuth went, he dropped massively. But people like that,
I just definitely. when I think he was like a 6th round pick, wasn't it? Was he 5th? Perhaps.
I think he might have been 4th. Let me double check. But yeah, he was definitely a day 3 pick.
Yeah, that to me, that just killed any hope of holding him. I think for me, what I'm looking for with my end of bench tight ends, I guess it's basically athleticism. I believe that's why Logan Thomas broke out last year. He's a freak athlete at the position, and that's basically what I'm looking for. Some of the guys that I'm targeting this year is, I'm still believing in Mo Cox. I think that, we talk about there being no good pass catching options in that offense. But I do think that Mo Cox could have a sneaky, breakout year. We've seen he's finally been named the starter ahead of Doyle. Another one that I'm sort of rostering potentially is Juwan Johnson in New Orleans, who again everybody's penciling the Adam Troutman breakout, but I think Johnson, converted wide receiver, has flashed a bit in the preseason. Is a very good athlete. Again, that's a guy I'm looking at. And then the last guy is in probably the crowdest tight end depth chart in the league, and that's Tyree Jackson, who is a converted quarterback. Maybe I'm falling into the Logan Thomas pitfall a little bit, but this is a converted quarterback that is, a freak athlete. Tyrik Jackson. The added benefit of Tyree Jackson is that at the moment he's on IR, so you can pick him up, chuck him on IR there, and add somebody else. So I would absolutely be looking at him as a potential stash as well.
That's a whole other thing, using IR spots and taxi spots to your advantage. And definitely, if you can stash someone on your IR just as a why not kind of pick, they're not taking up any bench spots. So you really need to start using that if you're not already. Make sure you're always using your IR spots, because it frees up your bench spots for these sort of players. Specifically with tight ends, I think everyone you mentioned, Mo Cox was amazing last year. For him, again, going undrafted, he wasn't a top 5 like Tonyan and Thomas, but for him going undrafted, and most people weren't even picking him up on waivers, I used him as my tight end 1 in a couple of leagues last year, every week or so, because Burton, again, another one, but he's not found a team this year, so we'll see how that goes. But someone along those lines, especially with going back to Mo Alley-Cox, going back to Wentz and Reich, they used Ertz a whole lot when they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
what's stopping them from using him this year? I think that's a great shout, Mo Alley-Cox.
And another that I think is worth monitoring is Dawson Knox. You know, we've got a great offense. Yes, they've got Stephon Diggs. Then they've got Cole Beasley if he plays. Emmanuel Sanders, who is getting very old. I think he's a good buy this year, but he's getting up there. Dawson Knox, he had a very usable rookie year. Yes, he drifted off a little bit last year, but this is again another really athletic guy that is in an offense that's going to put up points. You know, the Bills are one of the most pass-happy offenses in the league. I'm thinking that this could be, a decent little end of bench stash potentially. So the one last kind of, I guess, end of bench thing that I think you should be monitoring is basically at this point of the year, you really need to be monitoring your waiver wire, not just for guys to add, but making sure you're checking who is getting dropped. Okay. You will start to see some absolutely ridiculous drops of rookies that have been, drafted very highly. People have spent, second, third round rookie picks. And then because they don't do anything in the first couple of weeks, they'll start to get dropped. I've seen Rashad Bateman get dropped in 2 dynasty leagues.
Whoa!
Yes,
why?
Yes. I spent 100% of my fab to pick him up. I've seen Dwayne Eskridge get dropped in a few places. Now, I'm not the biggest Dwayne Eskridge believer, but if I can pick him up off waivers for free, I'm absolutely doing that. And I wouldn't be shocked if we start to see, a few of those kind of not the, Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, those, sexy names that went in early in the first round, but those second, third round picks. I saw Chase Claypool get dropped last year after like week 2 or 3, and then someone picked him up and it went mental. And I just think that those are the kind of guys that over the next few weeks, once people get into that redraft mentality, it's absolutely worth monitoring because they could be very usable, certainly.
I hate to mention this because I've taken your philosophy as well of taking day 1 or 2 picks, and that's really it. But another one you can add to that list is Tutu Atwell. I think being the wide receiver 4 on that team at best, I think he's fighting for the wide receiver 4 role with Deshaun Jackson, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods in front of him. He's fighting Van Jefferson for that 4 role. But I think he will get dropped in a lot of leagues. Someone like an Anthony Schwartz, who was taken in the 3rd round, and Nico Collins, if the Texans offense isn't clicking and becomes the Giants offense of last year, I think Nico Collins will get dropped in a lot of leagues. But all of these guys were taken in day 1, or all of these guys specifically in day 2, because they have top end athletic traits in some way, shape, or form. Tutu Atwell with the amazing speed, Nico Collins with the amazing speed versus size comparison. You've got to look for these type of players, and I do agree that we need to be looking out for them. And I suppose the other thing I want to mention is not every one of these players are actually going to hit. There are a lot of misses in every rookie draft, but we're just trying to maximize the amount of hits we can get. And these are players that I definitely want to stash. If anyone decides to drop them, then you're losing nothing by dropping a low-end player that's never going to see your lineup to find one of these higher chance guys, because as you've done the research, people going in day 1 or 2 of the NFL draft tend to find the field a lot more and tend to hit a lot more. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can throw in Diami Brown into that mix as well.
Yeah.
I would say, Tutu Atwell is not going to get dropped in any league. I'm pretty sure. I own him in. It feels like almost every single league. So yeah, I'm very confident in that. But I think it's just got to keep an eye on. Every time you get that sleeper notification or you get the email from MFL or whatever site you're playing on, it needs to be as much who's getting dropped as much as who's getting added, because it is very important that you're keeping track of that as well. So as we draw to a conclusion, we're going to move on to a couple of listener questions. Okay. So the first listener question of the week. So this is from Jean-Paul Doku. And he asks, everyone thinks they're going to contend this year. After how many weeks would you presume your opposition will throw in the towel? What do you think, Liam?
So I had thought about this because I saw this comment on Twitter. So for those that don't know, we send a tweet out every Monday to get listener questions for the following Tuesday, as you're watching now, or if you're listening, we go live every Tuesday during the season. So we send a tweet out asking for listener questions, and this actually came in through Twitter. So specifically for this one, anyway, I would say it really depends on how smart your league is. I play in a lot of varying leagues where some of them are for anywhere between $30, $50. And those tend to be the more switched on leagues where people go into rebuild really quickly. Obviously, they won't throw in the towel week 1 because they lost their matchup. But I think you're looking around week 4, and just a little plug, shameless plug here, but I will be running a weekly what to do with your roster article every week, and I will talk about, as a contender, what you need to do, as a non-contender, as a rebuild, what you need to do, and if you're in the middle, you don't know what to do, how to determine whether to push or not push for the playoffs. So listen to that specifically during the season. But I think smart players will tend to think about it week 3 or 4 when they're a couple of losses down. I think specifically if you get to midway through the season, so week 8 or 9, and you've got 4 losses, that really plays on someone's mind. And that's when you can start to draw people into accepting an offer that would put them more on the rebuild side. I don't know how you feel about this, Rich, because it really depends on the league. But I really think that as soon as someone gets about 3 to 4 losses, they're looking at rebuilding.
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult to say, because some people will, be stubborn and they will keep fighting until basically they're we're sort of week 10, week 11, even though they could be 2-8, but they still keep refusing to tank and rebuild, and fair play to them. You also get some leagues. I'm in a Devi league. It's a 10-team Devi league, and it feels like there's only 3 of us that are trying to win the league, and the other 7 people are rebuilding. It's it very much depends on the league you're in, your league mates, that kind of thing. If you're talking about yourself, I always say that if you're looking to rebuild, you need to rebuild as quickly as possible, but hold on as long as you can before committing. So what I mean by that is you want to wait until you are absolutely dead certain, right, I'm out. But the quicker you can come to that conclusion, the better, because the first person that declares they're rebuilding, they're going to get, if you're the first team to declare you're kind of rebuilding and you've got 11 other teams that think they're competing, you've got 11 teams vying for your kind of valuable win now assets. So I think that's kind of where I'm at, if that makes sense.
I have a perfect example of that. So there's a league that I'm in, Superflex Titan Premium 12-team league, where last year I was middling the tables, but because I missed the playoffs, I ended up getting the 103, which I'm not too bothered about. I got Trey Lance there, and yes, it's my only Trey Lance share before Tom comes into my mentions and starts trying to play me up about that. But with that league specifically, because I came middling of the playoffs or middling of the league, and I had Goff and Wentz and Dalton were my 3 quarterbacks there. I just went, forget this, I'm going into full rebuild. And before the start of the season, I've gone from having my own picks to having 5 first-round picks, 4 second-round picks this year. I've got one first next year, and then I think it's 3 or 4 seconds next year as well, just from selling guys. And I've still got players like Godwin, Gallup that could see a potential increase in value next year. The sooner you go into a rebuild, exactly like we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, that people aren't willing to sell players at the moment for picks. If you're the person that is accepting picks, you've got a much wider market than the players or the GMs or owners, however you want to say, the person that has the team. You've got a much wider market to sell players to, because everyone thinks they're a contender at this point, as the question says. So, as you said, try and hang on as long as possible. But if you're the first or the second person saying that they're going to rebuild, then you will have a much wider market than when people start to realize playoffs probably aren't in their future, or they're going to be the 6th seed and going against the unbeaten top seed or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But
and we've got one more question on a similar theme, I guess. So that's from 97 Phil B on Twitter. So his question was, your RB1 goes down hurt long term in week 1. Make a trade for a replacement and lose another starter, or trust your depth and pick someone off waivers? And to me, it's difficult, because the answer is that very much depends on your roster construction. You know, if you're win now, then you've probably got to go out and trade some future draft capital to go and replace that starter. If you're like me and you've got 20 running backs at the end of your roster, you're liking to think that you can find somebody to replace. If you're not a nailed on contender, then you probably need to be thinking, right, now's the time to hand in the towel and start looking towards that rebuild as such.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if your running back 1 goes down, then your season's most likely over. How many people last year had Christian McCaffrey go down and still win the league? I think that there's a lot to think about there, but it really depends on roster construction for me, and I'm trying not to cop out as much as possible. But if you can pick someone up, I'll try and pick someone up on waivers if I can. So like last year, as a prime example, Mike Davis. If you could have picked up Mike Davis, then you're most likely plugging him into your CMC role and still riding to the playoffs. But if not, and you miss out on that waiver spot, I'm immediately selling anything that I can that I don't think will have value or as much value next year, and just trying to get rid.
Yeah, but I think that the one thing I would say is don't panic. Don't panic, because as soon as you panic, you make stupid, irrational decisions. Try and keep it, realistic. Try not to panic too much. Take a little bit of time. Don't
sell undervalue.
Exactly. Take a little bit of time. As soon as you get that running back injury, the sharks will start to circle. Everybody will suddenly go, oh, yeah, he's lost CMC. He's not competing. He's going to rebuild. And everyone will start sending you below market deals. Just, don't panic, reassess, come up with a plan and go from there.
And if you ever need to talk to someone or get someone's opinion, we're both available on Twitter. If you've got us on Sleeper, again, we'll probably answer on there, or just tag the Dynasty pod at 5 Yard Dynasty, and we'll answer on there. If you ever need that, we'll always retweet it as well. So just give us a shout. But as Rich said, don't panic, and you'll get there. But I think that's concluding the show, Rich.
It is indeed. Did you want to mention our feedback, Liam?
I did. So I think it was over the weekend, I put out a form on the 5 Yard Dynasty account asking for podcast feedback. So if you're listening to this, we would muchly appreciate you getting in touch with us, telling us what you think. We'll retweet that probably tomorrow morning as this comes out. So that would be Wednesday when this comes out.
It's our pinned tweet on Twitter as well.
Oh, there you go. So it's pinned as well. So if you could fill in the feedback form, then we'd greatly appreciate it. Because what we don't want to do is bring content that you don't want to listen to or get worse in your opinion. So we want to continually improve because we're both striving for the best. So if you could do that, then we would greatly appreciate it.
In the words of Jalen Rose, you've got to give the people what they want. And that is what we're aiming to do. And on that note, that is us for the week. So thank you very much for those of you that checked in on the live stream. It was good. We had some nice questions flying in. Do remember, as I said at the top of the show, you can get 20% at manscaped.com using the code 5yard. You also get free shipping. If you've not done it yet, you're missing out. I promise you. It is, we can even get early Christmas presents. There you go. We're only 3 months away. Maybe
don't start talking about Christmas.
Yeah, maybe have a word with the missus, see if she can get you an early Christmas present right now. But really enjoyed it. Next week, 2 days, guys, we have got football. If you are listening to this on the podcast, it is less than 24 hours. We will have football. We've got a really interesting, very, I hope, unique kind of in-season plan. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you again next week.